Hello, everyone. Welcome to El Camino, a road to education and pregnancy prevention. We're really excited to have you with us today. We're just going to give everyone a few more minutes to join, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, I wanted to point out some features of the webinar platform that we'll be using during today's webinar. So if you look over to your control panel, you should be able to see a little tab that says questions. So throughout the webinar, you can type any questions you have into this tab, and our speakers will address as many questions as time allows at the end. And then the other feature I'd like to draw your attention to is a tab that says chat. So during today's webinar, we'll be doing a brief activity that uses this chat box. And at that time, you can use this feature to participate. And that's all I have for you for now. So like I said, we'll give people a couple more minutes to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Hello, and welcome to our webinar discussing our work developing and piloting El Camino, a road to education and teen pregnancy prevention. We're excited to share our experiences with everyone and are very grateful for the generous support that the JPB Foundation has provided throughout this whole process. Here's an overview of the agenda for the webinar. We'll start with some introductions, then move into describing the background of El Camino. Then we will provide a quick summary of the El Camino curriculum and move into the exciting stuff, demonstrating some program content and activities. Then we'll discuss our findings so far and finish with what the future holds for El Camino. You'll hear a few different voices from Child Trends today. I'm Kristen Anderson-Moore, Chris Moore, Senior Scholar at Child Trends.
I'm Janita Perrick, Research Scientist at Child Trends.
I am Bianca Facio, Senior Research Analyst at Child Trends.
And I'm Sam Beckwith. I'm a Research Analyst here at Child Trends.
We're also very lucky to have Guadalupe Martinez with us here today. Lupe facilitated El Camino recently in Los Angeles and will be sharing what that was like later on. Well, the work to develop El Camino began in 2012 when we scanned the field and saw a substantial gap in teen pregnancy prevention programs for Latinos. In this first phase, we reviewed the research and statistics on teen childbearing and pregnancy prevention programs for Latino adolescents and conducted interviews with teens, parents, program evaluators, and providers. Overall, we found very few culturally relevant intervention programs developed for Latinos, despite research suggesting that programs are most effective when they are developed with the target population in mind. Our review indicated that many current programs and policies are based on inaccurate assumptions about Latino attitudes, values, and motivations. We found, for example, that most Latino adolescents and their parents want to avoid early parenthood, a fact that goes against many common perceptions of Latinos. Additionally, the teens and parents we spoke with both strongly valued education, had high educational aspirations, and saw education as a path to economic success. This suggested there was a need for a fresh approach to reaching Latino adolescents, specifically by helping them to align their behavior with their high goals. One end result of this phase was developing the theory of change you see on your screen. Put into words, the theory of change is a culturally relevant program in the context of educational achievement will reduce exposure to unprotected sex, leading to increased educational attainment and ultimately a lower risk of poverty. Well, phase 2 of this project, also funded by the JPB Foundation, concludes this summer. It was the part of the project where we put all that background research into practice, developing, testing, and refining the El Camino curriculum. Working with expert curriculum developers and leveraging the theory of change and insights from the first phase, we designed El Camino. El Camino aims to reduce the risk of early childbearing using a goal-setting model, building student skills in decision-making and communication, and increasing knowledge on reproductive health behaviors. It was developed simultaneously in English and Spanish, and we prioritized making the curriculum culturally responsive to both Latino communities and other diverse populations. Over the course of 3 years, we tested the curriculum in 16 diverse classrooms across 7 locations among more than 300 students. These implementations included fully Hispanic classrooms that were taught in Spanish, as well as majority Black and racially mixed classes that were taught in English, with success in both. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the logos of the many implementing partners we worked with in this process. Thank you. Our team worked with school staff, community members, and students to develop, test, and revise the curriculum by identifying activities that are culturally relevant and that help students see the links between teen pregnancy and their educational and economic futures. The project team revised the curriculum after each implementation. These revisions were informed by feedback from facilitators, students, parents, community members, and expert advisors. Now I'll hand it over to Bianca, who will tell us more about where El Camino has been implemented to date.
Here is an overview of all of the places El Camino has been implemented to date. As you can see, we've had a pretty wide variety of locations and implementation types. We began in our own backyard of Washington, D.C. We have 3 classrooms across 2 schools implementing El Camino during the school day. This was our largest site to date, with over 160 students taking part in the program. Of these, one of these teachers delivered El Camino in Spanish, while the other 2 had English-speaking classes. Next, 2 facilitators in East Chicago, Indiana, delivered El Camino in an after-school setting. We also had an in-class implementation of El Camino in Tacoma, Washington, just south of Seattle. This winter, El Camino was implemented in a Baltimore-based nonprofit in an alternative high school in Philadelphia. Most recently, it was delivered during school lunch in Los Angeles, California. Here's a map showing all of the places where we have worked. Next, Janita will talk about the El Camino curriculum itself.
Thanks, Bianca. El Camino consists of 11 lessons across 3 major arcs. Each builds on the skills and information participants learned in the prior arc. So the 3 arcs are goal setting, reproductive health, and healthy relationships and communication. As Chris noted earlier, our formative research indicated that the Latino community valued education highly, but that young people need support to gain the skills to achieve their educational goals. In the first arc, students identify a key goal related to employment or education, and then they work backwards to determine the steps needed to reach that goal. This is called your path or Camino. The program introduces a goal-setting framework, ways to identify the warning signs, or signs that tell you that you might be straying from your Camino, how to think of both positive and negative road trips from your Camino, and setting limits to stay on track. Arc 2 on reproductive health provides extensive information about reproductive health. It's also the first time facilitators bring up sex in the curriculum. In the goal-setting arc, sex and childbearing only become topics of discussion when the students bring them up, which they typically do. Students learn accurate information in this arc, and they get the chance to practice positive behaviors related to safe sex and pregnancy, like putting on a condom the correct way. This arc covers both basic information about reproduction, like anatomy and how pregnancy occurs, as well as practical information on contraceptive types and community resources like reproductive health clinics that students can access. And the third and final arc focuses on healthy relationships and communication. Our background research indicated that teens may not trust information they hear from their partners, and that some female teens experience pressure from their partners, particularly older male partners. So in this arc, students learn to communicate assertively about their personal limits. These lessons also discuss styles of communication, setting limits in relationships, consent, and more. The program concludes by revisiting students' Caminos they had put together in Arc 1 and gives students a chance to update them based on everything they've learned in the program. Now, Chris will describe the core components of El Camino.
Thanks, Janita. It is critical to understand the core components that drive any intervention, and El Camino is no exception. We have identified the core components of El Camino as, first, El Camino is a goal-setting model at its core, such that youth identify their goals for age 25, and having done this, explore how they can reach their goals. Second, teachers do not tell students what their goals are or how to reach them. Rather, students identify their own goals, and teachers wait for students to bring up pregnancy prevention as a strategy for reaching their goals. Third, students develop a roadmap, their Camino, for reaching their individual goals and identify the steps along the way to achieving their goals. Youth, fourth, can recognize warning signs within themselves and develop strategies to resist situations that threaten their goals. Fifth, building knowledge, skills, and motivations related to reproductive biology and effective methods of contraception are critical to preventing unwanted pregnancy. Sixth, activities highlight that both males and females play an important role in sexual decision-making and avoiding unwanted or unprotected sex. And seventh, assertive communication skills are necessary so youth can avoid risky and unhealthy situations, reduce unwanted and unprotected sex, ensure consent in their relationships, and ensure progress toward their goals. Now, Bianca is going to guide us through one of the activities in the curriculum.
Thank you, Chris. Now we're going to do an activity called the Teen Parent Reality Check from Arc 1. It normally involves voting with your feet or walking around the room, but we're going to vote with our chat boxes instead. Let's answer a practice question. In this activity, we talk about some of the challenges associated with teen pregnancy and parenting. First, just type yes into the chat box if you know someone who is or was a teen parent or a parent at a young age. So you can type into your chat box if you know someone who was a teen parent or a parent at a young age. The chat box is located in your main menu. Oh. Great. In the classroom, students would be raising their hands. Make sure to use the chat box, not the question and answers, so we can all see your responses. Now, type yes if you've watched a TV show like 16 and Pregnant or a movie about teen pregnancy. Great. Becoming a parent in high school is highly likely to add challenges to your road trip and delay you reaching your goal. In this activity, we want you to think about how having a baby affects a young person's life. Typically, at this point in the activity, we would ask everyone to get up off your seats and gather in the middle of the room, and then there would be signs for yes and no posted on opposite sides of the room. We're just going to have to visualize in this case. We'd like you to imagine that you are the parent of a healthy 6-week-old baby, that you are in 10th grade, that you're getting good grades, that you're on track to graduate on time, and that you want to go to college. I'm going to read some questions out loud. After I read each question, please type yes or no into the chat box, depending on how you think you would respond. If you're not sure, you can type unsure into the chat box. We'll also have a few follow-up questions once you all respond. Remember, you're in the persona of a 10th grader with a 6-week-old baby. If we were in the classroom, you would be seeing the students line up all around the room depending on their responses and hearing a healthy debate rather than seeing it play out over chat.
We're also seeing some responses that some people cannot see their chat box. So if you're not seeing the chat box on your screen, then feel free to use your question box, and we'll just make sure to check there when looking for your responses as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
So the first question is, will your family let you live at home? I'm seeing various answers, yes. I see a couple, one no. So for the people that, oh, I see a maybe. So for the people that answered yes, would your parents or guardian let your partner live at home with you? How would you feel about that? I see an oh my God, no, and I see a don't think so. Awkward. So you would feel awkward about that. For the people that said no to this previous question, where do you live? How do you afford to live away from your home? So someone lives in Charleston and works 2 jobs. The next question in this activity is, do you stay in school? Yes or no? I'm seeing a couple of yeses. One person said, I would try. At the school, there is a childcare facility. Someone says, my parents would make me stay in high school, but college might not be an easy option. Great, thank you for these responses. For the people that said no or maybe, how do you think you'll get a high school diploma or GED later? And for the people that said yes, who watches your baby during the day? When will you make time to study? Someone answered, no idea. I don't know. Same. No clue. It's been great to see your responses. A few other prompts that students would discuss in this activity are, do you have a job? When your child is sick, do you miss school and work? Do you hang out with your friends on the weekends? Students really find that this activity helps them reflect on what it would be like to have a child at this point in their lives. We won't do an interactive demo for an ARC 2 activity today due to our time constraints, but we did want to show off an example of one of the materials that's used in this ARC. This is the contraceptive timeline. demonstrating how long one application of each contraceptive method is used for. As you can see here, it is mapped into the Camino, connecting it back to the idea that your reproductive health choices can play into your life goals and making the point that some types of contraception last longer and require less maintenance. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Janita, who will be running through another activity.
Next, we have an activity from ARC 3, where we practice setting sexual limits with romantic partners. Like the last activity, we're also adapting it for this webinar format. So in this activity in the classroom, students will break into small groups and work on providing assertive dialogue to set sexual limits. The characters in these scenarios are characters the students have met several times throughout the lessons. These scenarios are pretty tricky because students are navigating setting limits with somebody you like and are romantically involved with. And this kind of thing can be challenging for everybody, not just teens. So the way we'll do this is we will read part of a scenario, and then we'll ask you all to use your question boxes to suggest how the character can respond in an assertive manner. We'll read some of your suggestions aloud and then move through the rest of the scenario. And in the classroom setting, students complete the dialogue in their small groups, and then they have an opportunity to present in front of the class if they'd like to. So the first scenario is between Alicia and Pedro. And I'll go ahead and read this scenario. A little while ago, Alicia was at a party at Pedro's house, and he was trying to touch and kiss her. Alicia refused and left the party. About a week later, Alicia saw Pedro in the neighborhood. At first, Alicia was a little uncomfortable, but Pedro was very funny and joking around. So soon, Alicia felt more at ease. The two of them started spending time together. About 3 weeks after seeing each other regularly, Pedro gave Alicia a beautiful pair of earrings. The gift makes Alicia feel special and wanted, but she still doesn't feel she really knows Pedro, and she thinks it's too early to start having sex. Alicia also knows her mother would not approve of her going out with Pedro because he is 18 years old and Alicia is 15. Alicia is not using any type of contraceptive, and she knows she could never handle a pregnancy and being a mother at this age. And she really doesn't want anything to interfere with her plans to go to nursing school. So on Saturday night, Pedro took Alicia out and paid for a nice dinner. After dinner, Pedro invited her to his house. When they arrive at Pedro's house, no one is home. Alicia sits down and Pedro goes in the kitchen and comes out with 2 drinks. Alicia doesn't want to drink and thinks it is risky in this situation. So Sam will voice Pedro.
Come on, I saw you drinking at my party.
So we'll ask you all, how can Alicia respond assertively to this? So we have one person who says, I don't drink. Great. So Pedro and Alicia talk for a while, and then Pedro reaches over to start unbuttoning Alicia's shirt. How does Alicia respond to this? So we have somebody say, hey, not so fast. I don't think I'm ready for this. And please stop. I don't feel comfortable with that. Great, great responses.
I know you're nervous. Just do what feels natural. I know you have a great body.
So how does Alicia respond assertively to what Pedro just said? You have somebody who says, no, I'm not nervous. I just don't want to keep going this direction. Great. Somebody else who says, thank you, but not today. Great responses.
You know that I like you a lot. Think about those earrings I bought you last week. This will make us feel a lot closer to each other.
So how does Alicia respond to what Pedro just said? So we have somebody who says, so the earrings were a bribe so I can have sex. And we have somebody else who says, ha, love the earrings, but no, not happening. And we have somebody else who says, I can give those earrings back if it means I have to do something I don't want to. Great, thank you guys for your responses. So now, finish the story with how Pedro responds to Alicia's continued refusal to have sex. What are some things that he might say in response? So he may ask her to leave the house. Another response says, damn. Another response says, but I love you. He might imply that he's got other girls. Great, thank you all for your responses. So now we'll read another scenario. This time it's with Santiago and Sebastian. So I'll go ahead and read the narrative and then we'll go into some questions. Santiago has missed time at school because his mother was ill and he had to work at a store. He's trying to catch up on his schoolwork. Santiago really wants to reach his goal of going to business school, and he knows he needs to keep his grades up. In our last lesson, we heard that Santiago and Sebastian have become sexually involved. Their relationship is casual, and Santiago is sure that Sebastian is also spending time with somebody else. A few weeks ago, Santiago and Sebastian went to a party. There was a lot of drinking at the party, and Sebastian was drunk when they left. After leaving the party, Santiago goes back to Sebastian's house. Sebastian wants to have sex without a condom. Santiago knows the risk of getting STIs is much greater without a condom, and he doesn't want to worry about going for testing and needing the time and money to get treatment if he tests positive for an STI. So Sam is going to go ahead and voice Sebastian.
Hey, what's going on with you? It's Saturday night. Let's have some fun.
So how might Santiago respond assertively to this? I don't have condoms. We can have fun without a condom. Great responses.
Come on, you know it feels better without a condom. Why are you so on edge?
How might Santiago respond to this comment? We can have fun with a condom. I'm not on edge, but I don't want to put us both at risk. Great.
I thought we had something good going.
So how might Santiago respond to that comment? We do, but not without protection. I thought so too, but I'm not going to have sex without a condom. We can still have something good using protection. Great. So now finish the story with how Sebastian responds to Santiago's continued refusal to have sex. So we have somebody who says that he might say, why don't you trust me? Another option is he could say, okay, I'll make sure I get condoms next time. Great, thank you guys so much for your engagement and for your great responses. Besides being an activity that students tend to really enjoy, it's also rewarding to see students realize they're able to come up with assertive responses, even in challenging situations like this. Now we'll hear from Sam about some of our findings so far.
Great, thank you, Janita. So because we are researchers here at Child Trends, we ask students to complete surveys at the beginning and the end of the program to gather some data on how well it's working. Many of the questions in these surveys came from the Federal Personal Responsibility Education Program surveys, which some might know as PREP. One set of questions that we ask at the end of the program is if students think participating in El Camino has made them more or less likely, ranging from much less likely to much more likely, to have sex, to use contraception, or to use condoms in the next 6 months if they were to have sex. So as you can see on your screen, we have seen some really encouraging results. So especially when you look at all three of the questions together on the right-hand side, 91% of students indicated at least one of the three, that they thought El Camino made them less likely to have sex, more likely to use contraception if they were to have sex, or more likely to use condoms if they were to have sex. And each of those individually, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, also tended to move in the direction that we would really like to see, including nearly 75% of students saying they thought El Camino made them more likely to use condoms or ask their partners to use condoms. Additionally, and this is really important, that students really enjoyed the program. A large majority of them thought it was excellent or very good. And in fact, 94% of the students that we surveyed thought the program was good or better. And we're also going to discuss some more qualitative reactions from the students in just a minute. As part of our survey, we also saw some really encouraging movement on some questions that were related to students' knowledge and their attitudes as well. So as you can see on the screen, at post-test, the students were more likely to strongly agree that they had goals that they wanted to accomplish before having a child. And another change that's similar but not shown here was that they were marginally more likely to agree that at their age, having sex creates problems. Our survey also included a scale that measured students' confidence around consent and sex-related communication. So some items in the scale were, for example, how confident you felt talking to your partner about whether or not to have sex, and how confident that you felt going to a clinic to get contraception for you or for your partner. Here we see that at the end of the program, students felt significantly more confident navigating consent and communication around sex compared with their answers at the beginning. Students also had a much higher average percent correct on 3 items that assessed their knowledge of contraceptives. The items in this index were true or false questions. They were, the IUD is more effective at preventing pregnancy than condoms. That's true. The second statement was the implant is more effective at preventing pregnancy than the pill, which is also true. And the third statement was the IUD causes infertility, which is false. So students at the beginning of the program got just under half of the questions right, or 49%, and that increased by a quarter at the end of the program to 74%. So if we think about all the info from the past few slides as a whole, we see that not only did the students' intentions tend towards having less sex or having safer sex, but students also felt more confident in that area, that they were more knowledge, and they were also more goal-oriented than they were at the beginning of the program. So besides these quantitative results, we also have some reactions from students and facilitators that Bianca is going to lead us through now.
Thank you, Sam. Here are some quotes from students from our focus groups about what they took away from El Camino. I felt like I could teach someone to say no today.
It helps us to not get off track of our El Camino. The whole point is to be on track and reach your goal.
To be safe and not leave our caminos. Don't listen to those who say who can't. I will achieve my dreams.
It helps a lot to learn about giving a firm no and staying on our caminos to go far.
I know a girl who's in a bad relationship, so I think if she were to take this class, she would be able to see how to have a good relationship.
And we also debriefed with our facilitators to see what their thoughts were on the program. So here's a selection of responses. I can't speak highly enough about this.
I like that students had a voice in the curriculum and could choose what happens next.
I think it's a curriculum that focuses a little bit more on Latinos, so that's something we've been looking for. I like that.
A lot of questions. They're intrigued and excited to learn more.
And we're very pleased to have Guadalupe Martinez here with us today. She's a site coordinator with Communities and Schools of Los Angeles, and she recently facilitated El Camino and will be telling us about what that was like. So, Lupe, could you tell us what stood out to you about El Camino when you first learned about it?
Sure. When I first learned about the curriculum, I was intrigued by the fact that it uses the concept of storytelling to deliver its lessons. Students follow the same characters throughout the curriculum, so they get a little emotionally attached to the characters, kind of like you would when you watch a TV show. I also really liked that the stories ended with a cliffhanger, so the students were always excited for the next lesson.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. And could you tell us about what your group makeup was like?
I had a group of about 14 girls, both 9th and 10th graders, as well as both Black and Latino, and we met about once a week on Wednesdays during lunch in the CIS office.
And how do you think they reacted to the El Camino program?
I think they reacted pretty positively. At the end of each lesson, they always had a lot of questions, which shows they were engaged with the material and processing the information.
Did you notice any changes that you could spot in the knowledge or the attitudes that your group had over the course of the program?
I definitely noticed that the students were more open to talking about topics like pregnancy and contraception that are sometimes considered taboo at home. They felt comfortable coming to me outside of these sessions and sometimes even bringing in their friends who were not part of the lessons. And we reviewed material, they asked questions, they got referrals. I also think the students became more confident, especially in situations where they had to say no to peer pressure.
That's great to hear. And how about you? What do you think your favorite part of El Camino was?
My favorite part about the curriculum is that it includes activities like Vote with Your Feet, where students are able to discuss their views and opinions. They have a chance to elaborate on their opinions, and I get to learn more about my students and their experiences, which I love to hear.
So do you think you have any future plans for El Camino?
Yes, I definitely plan on continuing to implement the program, but this time I want to have two groups. Instead of just the girls group, I want to add a boys group to see what that dynamic is like. I really enjoyed the program, and I definitely recommend it to any organization or school that's interested in engaging students in conversations about goal setting, reproductive health, or life skills.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience with us, Lupe. And I would also encourage people towards the end of the webinar, if you have any questions for Lupe, feel free to direct them to her as well. So now Chris will talk us through what the future holds for El Camino.
Great. Thanks, Sam and Lupe. Well, we are currently scaling up the program. That is, we are working with our existing partners like Lupe, and also seeking new partners to implement El Camino broadly. We can provide both remote and in-person training to interested organizations. We're developing an online training for El Camino, and we have some limited funds to provide in-person training. If there is additional interest, we have a cost sheet to provide in-person training for additional sites. And of course, an updated curriculum will soon be complete and available. And this curriculum is available to both existing and new partners. Children's can send a link for you to download, anyone who's interested. Also, it will be available on Children's website in the near future. Well, before we wrap up, as promised, we'd like to spend a few minutes answering some of your questions. Because your mics are muted, please type your questions into the question box on your screen and we'll answer to the extent possible. And we know you've been very responsive. You're good with the technology, so we look forward to hearing your questions. Okay, actually there are questions already. One is, do you recommend separating into male and female groups, or is it okay to do co-ed? We've tried to be extremely flexible in the design of El Camino, during school, after school, all female, all male, mixed groups. And it seems to be working well in all of those groups. So no, it's not necessary to do one-sex groups, but if in a particular location or situation, that seems like the best strategy, that's fine too. So what is the financial cost is another question.
This is a great question. Currently, the curriculum will be available for free. It will be available for us to send to you for download. It is currently saved in a Dropbox type of place, so that if you're interested in looking into the lessons and studying and deciding if it's right for you, we can do that. Training does incur a cost, and the materials do incur a cost. Like Chris said, we have limited funds for training if your organization or your school cannot pay for it, but that is a conversation that we are willing to have with each of you.
Is there any type of brochure available that we could share with the community? I work in a pediatric clinic, and I think that the type of information would help a lot. A really great idea. We have not developed such material as yet, but we do want to do another summary of the curriculum, and maybe that's a place where it could be placed. How many sessions is the curriculum, and how long are the sessions?
So there are 11 lessons in the curriculum, and they're 45 minutes each.
So do you train the trainer? Well, we're through the piloting phase, and we don't yet have a train the trainer approach. We are intending to train ourselves in the short run. Our goal, of course, is to do a randomized controlled trial evaluation. And when we are at that point and we know that we have evidence that this program is as effective as we currently believe and hope that it will be, then I think we might think about how to really scale it up really broadly. Right now, we are going to do online training and in-person training as to the extent we possibly can. Do we have any idea when training and curriculum will be available? These are great questions. We are meeting next Wednesday. We are going to finish the curriculum, and then it will be available shortly. So I believe our intention is to share the curriculum with everyone who is on this webinar, and we are happy to make it available to people through our website as well.
The curriculum will be available hopefully in August, and it will be available in early August in English, and hopefully by the end of August in Spanish. The training, we are doing a couple of trainings locally in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area in August, and in the meantime, we're also developing the online training for those of you that are more far away. But like we've said, the training, we can fly to you, and we could talk about the cost of that in further conversations.
So an important question is whether there's any opportunity for parent involvement. And this is obviously a really, really important part of any curriculum, and it's also probably the hardest task that any curriculum faces. It is very hard to get parents to be engaged, and unfortunately the ones who are engaged are the ones who maybe have the least reason to be engaged. So we tried several strategies and had the usual results, and we've ended up with an electronic strategy. Kids can text their parents. They can also, of course, talk to them in person, but we have found that many of the parents are working long hours, they're working multiple jobs, they're working weekends, and that it is really difficult for them to have time to talk with their teenagers. This doesn't mean they don't care or that they don't want to be engaged, however. And in one of our classes, I know a student texted her mother during the class, and the mother texted right back, and it led to an entire class discussion. So, using electronic media seems to be a very promising approach. How do you approach the schools? El Camino includes information around contraception, and that is, in some communities, a barrier to approaching schools. We have not run into a single school official, however, who doesn't think that it's really important to help kids think through their goals and make decisions, not just slide into sexual activity and pregnancy. So there is a desire to have this curriculum even in settings where it's not really going to happen during the school day. And that's one reason it's been done after school. It's been done during the lunch hour. And so we are extremely flexible about that and willing to work with local schools. We've also been able to demonstrate to schools that the El Camino curriculum meets their health objectives. And one that is helpful to the local school people in terms of convincing the powers that be that this is a good idea for them. There's another question about whether we've had follow-up with the students after the completion of the program.
So we have not had quantitative follow-up. We did not do a survey after the initial post-test, but we have had a couple of focus groups with students that we have been able to get in contact with after the curriculum. These focus groups included students from the initial pilot in Washington, D.C. It included students from the first school where we implemented in Spanish, and then we also had another focus group with students where we implemented in English. When we spoke to those students, we were very happy to find out that the students still thought about El Camino, and they asked if we were going to go back to the school and implement El Camino again because they had friends that that they thought needed this information.
And actually, I'd love to ask Lupe to respond to that particular question and actually any other questions as well. Have you heard anything from students subsequently? I know students are on summer break now.
Well, the students that I work with are on my caseload, so I see them monthly, regardless of whether they're doing the El Camino curriculum or not. But that's definitely true what you mentioned, that they bring in their friends to get referrals or to get the information if they weren't part of it. So there's definitely follow-up in that way.
So from your point of view, Lupe, do the quantitative findings that Sam shared that students appear to be less likely to have sex or more likely to use contraception or condoms if they do have sex? Is that your impression as well?
Yes, because they definitely come in to seek more information to make those decisions. So they're not blind anymore. If they're thinking about having sex, they'll talk to me or to someone they trust because they have the information of, what it might cause them to get off of their Camino or what's the best option for them. And they can get referrals to see doctors or specialists that can help them make these decisions.
Thank you. Question just came in. How important is it to have formal links with school-based health centers? Victim services, rape counseling, that kind of thing. We have had some interest on the part of the teachers in having a medical professional come in and do some of the ARC 2 reproductive health lessons. And they have done that. In fact, one of the teachers was a doc. Whether there have been linkages with other aspects of reproductive health services in the school actually is a really good question, and we'll have to follow up on that. I don't know, Lupe, if you have any insight into that with the students with whom we've worked.
At my school site, we do actually have a health center. So I took the girls at the end of the curriculum on like a little field trip so that they got to meet the doctor. They got to sign up for services in case they ever needed them. So I think the partnership is really important if it's available. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We do provide a lot of FAQs so that teachers who may not have a reproductive health background can consult that for their information, but others have chosen then to bring in a reproductive health professional. There's a question about after-school programs, and certainly it has been done in an after-school setting, and we are fine with that. We had one teacher do it every day, was finished in 11 days with the curriculum. So we've had, once a week, and that has apparently also worked. So we've done it in a variety of different settings in school and outside of school. It's worth mentioning, which we haven't already mentioned, that we also worked with Youth Build in Philadelphia. We developed a curriculum that was somewhat modified for young people 18 to 24. I think most of the students were 18 to 21, and found that this goal-setting curriculum really resonates with that age group as well. I mean, they're at Youth Build because they are seeking to develop their goals and work toward their goals. But there are real needs for this kind of goal setting with all the steps, the assertiveness and consent discussions, and the reproductive health knowledge with the older age group as well. So that again, went extremely well. So we're really finding that this is working in very diverse settings with diverse populations. Okay, the question is, do you provide resources or knowledge of where to find resources that could help the students, like victim services and rape counseling?
So the curriculum provides multiple resources. Like Chris said, we provide FAQs to answer frequently asked questions that throughout our research we found that students usually ask. But then we also ask the teacher in each location to develop a one-pager of resources for students to reach. We ask teachers to do this because based on the different locations where we've been in California, DC, Indiana, Washington State, etc., the resources available in each state and each location and each city, they're all different. So we feel that a teacher is it's best suited to put together a list of resources for the students to be able to use.
Okay, another question is, does the curriculum stay the same when administered to different populations? And we really wondered about that when we were starting out, because obviously classes are not always going to be entirely Latino. And we found one of the teachers changed one of the names, and that seemed to be all the change that was necessary. Subsequently, we have done the curriculum in a variety of settings, many of which were not just one group. And it seems to be going very well across different populations. So thank you for that question. You said lots of great questions, by the way. Do we have a sense of how many students were already sexually active when they entered El Camino? Sam, you want to take that?
Sure. So what we saw was overall about half or just under half of students that we were able to get data from were sexually active before they began El Camino. Those numbers were a little bit higher for male students and a little bit younger for female students. So it was certainly not a set of groups that were completely absent beforehand. It seems like we were getting engaged at a part where there was a good mix of sexual experience. El Camino is a relatively brief program, but it is worth mentioning that we did not see movement on students becoming sexually active during the program or from pre-test to post-test, which is often a measure that people people use when they are researching these sorts of things.
Yeah. So one person says, I'm interested in how many of the youth were younger as compared to older. I'm guessing more likely to see change in protection with older youth. And we were initially focusing on ninth grade students and learned that in many of the communities and classes where this was implemented, that the students are not all 14. There are some of them 16, 17, 18, 19. Some of them have recently arrived in the United States. And so we really provided the curriculum in to a variety of age groups. Interestingly, I mentioned that we did it with Youth Build among young adults. We are also developing a modified curriculum, which is really around healthy relationships, and testing it here in the District of Columbia with middle school students. And I think the common factor is the Camino, the road. The idea that life is a road and that you have goals, and if you want to achieve those goals, then you need to proceed in at least somewhat thoughtful, rational way toward those goals. Something about the concreteness of the Camino picture, the image, the discussions around the Camino seems to really help students who may not have a delineated life plan develop a life plan to reach the goals which they really do have. So, developmentally, do you think the curriculum really resonated equally with 14-year-olds and 20-year-olds? I would say differently, but as far as we know, equally. It's an interesting question for those of us who are researchers to explore. Do others have any other comments on that? And again, Lupe, if you want to respond to this or some of the other questions, please do.
Sure. As Chris mentioned, the older population we worked with was at Youth Build, and they found, particularly with the reproductive health information, they were generally lacking knowledge in terms of anatomy and how pregnancy occurs, intricacies related to consent. Having that space to kind of discuss those topics was very important to them, and they also had never really had a space to communicate assertively and practice that. So all of these kind of situations and scenarios very much clicked with them as well.
Lupe, I don't know if the girls in the class you taught were pretty much all the same age. So that may
yeah, I had primarily 9th and 10th graders, so in that 14, 15, some were turning 16 age, but I think it worked really well with them.
So I was wondering about the issue of consent. Was that something that led to a lot of discussion among the girls in your class?
Yes. Just because I feel like they see it in shows and movies a lot. That show 13 Reasons Why came up during the conversation about consent, so it was very relevant, and I think we definitely got the point across that no means no and only yes means yes. So
great. Well, we want to thank everyone who has joined us for this hour. We hope that this is not the end of our communication around El Camino. As you can tell, we're all very excited about it and believe that it has a future, and we'd really very much like for you to be a part of that. Thanks again. Have a good day.